have 2 levels of membership for the webinars, which are weekly, and for electronic copies of our publications, plus all previous publications we've done, it's £5 a year, which less than 10 pence a week, which I think we can all agree is a pretty good price. If you want physical copies of the journal and magazine, it's £20 a year.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Karin Beasant. She she's a lead for South Bristol Paranormal. She's also the lead investigator and looks after the paranormal team at the Jamaica Inn itself. She's also just landed herself a bit of a cushy job with Visit Somerset, where she's the paranormal consultant for businesses within the Somerset area. She advises on heritage locations. She's a founding member of the UK Paranormal Society, and she's passionate about the accuracy of the historical content of venues.
Ooh, sounds impressive.
I've
Do
done
you
my
hear the
homework.
accent?
I've done my homework. Can I just ask if everybody can mute themselves tonight, please? We're getting a little bit of feedback. Thank you. I think you all know me. I'm Caroline. Obviously, I run my own team, Somerset Paranormal Investigators UK. I look after private cases within Somerset that come forward to our team. And I also look after in the investigations for ASSAP, and I'm the lead investigator and case triage person, and hand them out to the trained trainers. So that's us. So if you just bear with me for 2 seconds, I'm the lady that's going to be doing the sharing of the screen. Right, from the beginning. Can you all see the okay. Karin, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Right, off you go then, my lovely.
We're ready?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much for having myself and the lovely Caroline. It's such an honour to talk again on one of the ASSAP's webinar. I've been a member for many years and absolutely adore the society and what it stands for. And it's made me change my views to more sceptical views over the years, thanks to the likes of Kev Kerr and other people that were associated with it before. So myself and Caroline were having many a chat over the last few months, and we wanted to bring together something a little bit different, because it's very easy to talk about the paranormal, a famous location, but one thing that we've noticed is the change of it and what is responsible and why the reports have changed down many years. I'm interested in the ethical side of it and the responsibility of when you are lucky enough to be a booking agent and the resident team, how important it is to keep data, interviews, and try to be as honest as possible in the reported phenomenon there, and also be careful how you interpret it yourself. Just quickly, a very quick example. We had in the summer a very large YouTube paranormal team in, and it recently went up and they interviewed a member of staff, and the girl explained about this shadow figure, and she said it had no head, and then suddenly the presenter said the headless ghost. Now, if I don't nip that in the bud, it's suddenly going to be a headless ghost haunts the Jamaica Inn. And it shows how easy it is for a haunted venue to be labelled with something that is not factually true, or, there hasn't been sufficient reports to say, well, yeah, that seems to be a phenomenon that happens a lot. So, this is the reason why I think it's so important now in the field for us to be a bit more conscious and to have a bit more responsibility with historic locations and preserve not only the correct historical information, but also how it's branded. And I'm so glad that the new owner that's taken over the Jamaica Inn has the same point of view and doesn't want a tackiness. He wants to have it as it should be, respectful, but also truthful. And that is the way forward, I think, for lots of locations. Caroline, your view before I carry on.
Absolutely. As I've changed the way of my own investigating over the years, I think everybody starts as that giggly teenager where you would go out with your pals and you would drive to a location outside, you know, in the dark, and you would do your urban exploring, and that was it. It was thrills and kicks in the beginning. And now, over the years, you just want the proper information. So you can't really turn up at a location until you've done your homework. And that doesn't just mean switching on Google and doing a wiki, you know, look around. I have the historic newspapers that I look at and go through Ancestry and try and get as much information as I can on census and details that way. So getting the correct historical information is absolutely important. And if you can get somebody that you can do interviews personally with that's lived in the property and had experience, even if it's 50 years ago, which Karin is going to mention a bit later on in this talk, I think that helps to build the picture and get the truth.
Thank you. Right, should we start the next slide? So probably everyone, unless you've lived under a rock, would know about the Jamaica Inn. It was made famous, of course, by Daphne du Maurier's book when she visited there in November 1930 and 1931. And it's thanks to the vicar of Altrincham, the local church, in 1931, when he came to afternoon tea at the Jamaica Inn and regaled her with stories of smuggling and wreckers, inspiring her to write the famous book and put the Jamaica Inn on the map. Next slide. Now, one thing we do know about the Jamaica Inn is the history has been wrong, and even on the website, and we're slowly starting to correct that thanks to research and also a local historian who the former owner, Alan Jackson, hired, and with the information that I kindly had a few years ago from Helen Bennett, a fantastic researcher from down the south coast. Next slide. Now, you can see the inn there, you can see the lovely A30 that has gone through. But if you can see the straight road, supposedly before the hamlet existed in 1760, there was a Roman track that went along there on the way to a village called Temple and further along. And I'll come back to that in a second. Now, it's like a TARDIS, the Jamaica Inn. From the front, it still has the resemblance of the old, you know, smuggling inn. But as you can see over the years, it has been enlarged. And one fascinating thing is why we are having reports in the modern extensions. This opens up a question that if ghosts and spirits are real, does that mean that they see us and their surroundings in real time? Perfect example in 2018, Rachel Haywood from Rope, fantastic investigator, was sat in the bar with myself and Sabrina from her team. I'm gutted I didn't look up at the right time, but she happened to look to her right, and sat in one of the chairs with his elbow on the table was a man dressed in late 1700s attire. Little did she know what she described in detail has been reported there at least from 2016. Now, she said it wasn't the shock of seeing an apparition, it was the look on the gentleman's face, a mixture of mirth and amusement, and what the hell are you doing? All in the few seconds that she saw him. Next slide. So we see the lovely front of the Jamaica Inn, and I must admit that I'm a bit of a nerd with it, and I absolutely adore the place. And when you first come into the Jamaica Inn by the old entrance, you are transported back to the 1760s and beyond. Next slide.
Can I just make sure that is the entrance on there?
Sorry?
That's the entrance, isn't it?
Sorry, I lost you then.
Is that the original entrance into the Smugglers?
That's the original entrance, and the dwelling house went to the end of the chimneys. It was totally different.
In that one, yeah.
But I'll explain that when we get to the history side.
Do you want me to go on to the rooms, room by room now?
Yeah, whatever you want to do. Brilliant. So thanks to Steve Higgins from Higgy Pop, his layout is far better than me, who cannot even paint a wall, could ever do. So with his permission, we're allowed to share this, and it shows the layout. And interestingly, when you look on the bottom left, those original bedrooms, most people always concentrate on room 3, 4, 5, and 6 because they're the famous haunted ones. Every other room, 7, 8, 9, and then above the stable block that only went in the 1970s, room 10, 11, 12, they each have their own paranormal reports. And recently I've been going through the visitors book. I've started in 2010, and I'm cataloguing the reports there, which are quite interesting, and we'll come back to that. Now, the new block again, you will see the downstairs on the far right, room 23. If you like to point to that one, Caroline, the top, that's it. That one seems to be a hotbed of reports. And also, if you go down to the bottom, room 27 and 34. And I'll come to those slightly later. But it shows you the layout. Sorry?
They're both on the corner aspects, aren't they? How strange is that?
Yes, yes. So room 27 to 34, the downstairs rooms, that was originally a cowshed, because as I said before in the previous talk, it was a working farm for over 100 years. Next slide. So we have the museum, and again, the most famous reports obviously are the children, and going back to how we influence it. I remember when I went there first 14 years ago, we were always told in one of the cabinets about the elephant, stuffed elephant, and his ears move. Last 7.5 years, I've never had a report or seen it. So it shows here probably one person reported it, and then it became a ghostly fact. And that is why we have to be so careful, even with names. We can presume a name, we cannot prove it. Your experiences there, Caroline?
If you were to continue down here, you go to where the little back room is, isn't it? So I believe that somebody felt a dog brushing up against their leg in the back room.
Yeah.
And we had dark shadows up where the Ouija board is, which is around here, isn't it? That people could see something walking across this. Personally, I missed out on all this, setting the equipment up.
Now, I saw my first apparition in the museum 14 years ago of the little blonde-haired Victorian dress girl. What I didn't know was that she's been reported for many, many years and is still reported now. You know, we can surmise the name. The most common name used is Elizabeth, but again, I try to be careful and, you know, try to say we cannot prove it. This is what we suppose, and this is what supposedly answers to it. Next slide. Right, so the stable block is very interesting.
Shall I just go back so you can show the location of where they are
Yeah.
next to each other? So we've got
So we got the courtyard, and then to the left you will see the stable block and the museum.
so they're next to each other there, aren't they?
That's right.
That's the museum. And
That's the stable block, that's the museum.
okay.
So we know that in 1778, when the coaching trade and the toll booths were put in, that carriages and more trade came along, and that's when it became the Jamaica Inn. Now, interestingly, if you look to the right of the photo, you will see a window. Now, I have a theory. I cannot prove it. I have to do more research. But I am wondering if the building behind it, which is now the museum, could have been the original barn to go with the house. Because when you look across the road to the old farmhouse, there's a cottage next to it, which used to be their barn. And that was built round about 1760 to 1780. We're not 100% sure, but we know that the White House was the original forge now. So again, you know, being careful, but to me, that's a mystery that hopefully in time we can uncover. If I can get the owners to have some dendro testing of the beams in the attic, hopefully we might find out a date, or did they come from a boat? Next slide. So we're going to the Smugglers Bar, the main bar, but we do now know that originally it was the dining room. And the stairs that you go up now to go to the old part of the haunted bedrooms, the original stairs used to come in and go up from the dining room itself. So in 1959, there was a lovely lady called Dawn, as a 17-year-old. She started working there for 10 years, and she came up and gave us a tour. So now we know of the layout of that time period, and how different some of the rooms were. And obviously there's an extra bedroom upstairs that I'll talk about, and how the reports were slightly different. Now, the Smugglers Bar, just out of interest, I had two or 3 weeks ago, one of the guests reports seeing a young lady, she said late teens, in a dark dress. Now, many people aren't aware that in 2018, a lady was staying at the Jamaica Inn in December. She just finished their dinner. It was about 9:15 at night. She wasn't drinking. She was sat with her husband. To the top left-hand photo, where you have the big bench the other side, there was one other couple there, and she noticed a girl around about 15 in a dark purple Victorian dress, high collar, with an apron and a cap. And her first reaction was, oh wow, what a lovely, you know, thing. The staff were dressing up in period costume, and this girl was carrying a tray. As she came towards her, the lady picked up her empty glass to give to her, and the young girl disappeared right in front of her. And she remarked to me after, she just sat there holding the glass out still in the empty air, turned to her husband and said, I think I've seen a ghost. And, you know, to me, that is interesting, because she has nothing to lose when, you know, when saying this. If anything, she felt quite embarrassed. Now, where the main fire is, to the left, supposedly that we call this Jack's chair. Now, most haunted say he haunts the snug behind. So it shows how that's changed from 2004. Now, interestingly, the reports of Jack, if you go back 30, 40 years, he was a sailor, And then over time, it's changed to a highwayman, a smuggler, a wrecker, or a traveller. We don't know if it's true. We don't know if the name's true. But whatever it is, it seems to answer to that. And one thing that's quite apparent is the humour. Now, we always think of ghosts of being very bland, etc. But this one seems to have a very naughty sense of humour and on command. Very interestingly, this year we have taken guests off to different parts of the inn, blindfolded with walkie-talkie. They don't know what we're going to ask. And 3 times, supposedly Jack has grabbed their right buttock on command. Now, we're very careful to keep it as strict as possible. You know, sometimes we'll ask for a touch on the right shoulder. Gentleman on the upstairs outside room 3, we quietly asked for him to touch his right ankle, and this chap came down. He was about my age, late 50s, very rational, wasn't scared. He said, the only thing that happened, he said, I felt like someone had grabbed my right ankle. Now, can't prove it, but it fascinates me, and it fascinates me even more, the people's perspective with it. Now, you had a wonderful experience in the bar, didn't you, Caroline?
With the thermal camera. So this table is not here all the time, is it? And underneath this area, there's a plaque. What does the plaque say, Karin?
Joss Merlin was murdered here.
And I think that's come from the book, Jamaica Inn.
Yes. Yeah.
Where the plaque was, nobody had been standing. I don't believe that the fire was on that night, because I've got a photograph of us in front of it and it wasn't on.
Mm.
So there wasn't a known heat source, unless, of course, the radiators were going. But where this watched the heat source, we've got it recorded, but unfortunately, because of things that's cropped up in the last couple of weeks, I haven't had time to get every single bit of footage for you guys, but I promise I will find it at some point and share it. So on the thermal camera, we watched this heat source come up from the ground, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. And we stood our team next to it, and it probably got to about 6 foot. Can't explain it. No heat source, no radiator near it. Isn't that correct?
Yes. And your experiment with the guitar, that was very interesting.
That's the upper bar, which we'll talk about, on the lower bar.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, next slide, please.
So do you want to explain where this one is?
So what we call the old block of bedrooms, you'll see the stairs now are between room 3 and 7. Originally, 7 was a bigger room where the staircase didn't exist. And in the 1950s, room 3 was the landlord's living room and 7 was their bedroom. So it shows that there were only a couple of rooms being, two rooms being rented out. I have a wonderful report from a lady that was born there in 1955. Her bedroom was room 5, and I'll go into that in a minute because it's very interesting to Caroline's report when she was there in January.
So for the sake of this, corridor would come up from the stairs, and it runs in front of 3, 4, and 5 and 6.
Yes. So like most buildings, you can see how slanted it is. The floorboards are uneven. So some people obviously feel as if they're on a ship, that sort of thing, but it's obviously a natural explanation. Myself and many others have witnessed being in one of the haunted rooms, hearing footsteps outside, but the motion activated lights have not come on. So when you go and check and you open the door, the lights come on, but a living person will have to set those off, hopefully a living person. I've had footsteps when I've stayed in room 3 and room 5, but interestingly, nothing in room 6. So was room 4 your experiments or 3?
Room 4, we didn't get round to experiments. It experimented with us, which we'll show you in a minute.
Right. So room 4, when I went there 14 years ago, there was talk of a highwayman standing in the corner with a tricorn hat by the window in the bed. At the time, there were 2 single beds there. Now, I knew nothing of this, and interestingly, I'm as psychic as a brick, as I tell everyone. And I was sharing with a friend of mine, and I had the really horrible feeling of being watched, but it could have been the excitement of investigating, etc., that sort of thing. Lots of reports in room 4, children, things being moved. And interestingly, there's an alcove to the left. And this is the fascinating report. We had 2 independent witnesses say of a hooded figure. We kept it quiet because we wanted to see if there were some more. Then we had another one. And again, it's about being really, really careful, because most people's reactions when you say hooded figure is monk. Well, there's no monks there. This figure, interestingly, described and as they called it a Gandalf type figure. So more like a pilgrim, with a hood over the head and a dark beard. Now we thought, okay, that's interesting, just there. Then in the main bar, behind the main bar, is the cellar, which is on the same level. And Ben, a night manager, was knelt down, putting bottles on the shelf, when a bottle came out from the shelf, lifted up over the other bottles, and landed down perfectly in front of him. And as he looked to the left, he saw what he called a Gandalf type figure, an old man, just literally a few seconds, and then it disappeared. Now, this year, one of the young girls who, again, didn't know anything about this, in the lower restaurant by the fireplace, she came out with a kitchen door and saw a man, a hooded figure again. That's at the back restaurant. That's it, just down there. Now, again, that's a modern building, 1980s built. So why are there paranormal reports? But anyway, she went back into the kitchen, came back, and it was still there, went back, brought someone, it had gone. Now I thought, okay, very interesting. Then 2.5 weeks ago, a couple were staying in room 34, and the woman woke up to see a man in a cloak with the hood up, with a long white beard, leaning over her husband. She said she saw it for about 3 to 5 seconds, then he disappeared. So again, interesting, but trying to keep it as factual as possible. There could be a connection, because before the hamlet was built, and that was a Roman track, it did lead to the village of Temple, and that was the site of an early Knights Templar, our equivalent of a bed and breakfast, because I can never say the word. So who knows? Is it a pilgrim? Is it just someone just sheltering from bad weather as they walked along? Who knows? Right, next slide.
I need to talk about this room.
Oh yes, sorry, darling.
So apologies, I've just had a text to say that my sound is dropping in and out. I'm on my old laptop because the new one hasn't got permissions from Microsoft to play my recording, so I've had to go back. So apologies everybody for this. So the night in question that our team spent in Jamaica Inn, we'd gone upstairs and we'd been in room 3. We'd finished and we'd moved into this room. And then Karin messaged us and said, can you go and have a look along the haunted corridor and up towards the stable block bedrooms? Because block and heard noises. So I came out of 4, went up to the corridor, and as I got here, I heard a lady whispering something directly into my ear. What she said, I don't know. It's something like, "I need to speak to you." And I said, "Oh, hold that thought. I'll be back in a minute. I've got to go and look for something for Karin." And carried on up here. No one was around. Came back down through the bedrooms, and as I got to here, the television in room number 9 came on incredibly loudly by itself. So I knocked on the door to say, "Can you turn the TV down, because we're investigating and it's too much noise." And there was nobody in the room. The person who was in that bedroom was downstairs. So it started off on the normal sound level, and it increased to be incredibly loud. So you couldn't even stand outside the door without it hurting your ears. The person had come up and turned the TV off. I went back into room number 4. So as I came in the door, which is over here, I sat on the bed. In this room, I've got another girl next to me, another girl here. There was a chair in this corner now, and one of the males in our group sat there. There's a chair over here. One of our females was sat there. Martin was stood in front of me, and there was one lady on the floor. A camera on the window. There was a camera over here, a camera here. I'm sat on the bed with a chest cam on, and Martin is in front of me with a chest cam on. And I've also got a Zoom recorder in my hand, and they're all independently recording, every single one of them. So we've got the whole room covered. As soon as I walked in the door from here to here, I get poked in my right-hand side waist, and I go, "Oh," and look around and think, "Who did that?" But none of my team were near me. I sat on the bed and I got poked again. And I said, "Oh, I've got poked again. I don't like this." I've asked Judy to read out what's going on in the room. And she sat over here and she starts reading. As she's starting to read, I say, "Oh, I've just got poked." And then we had this happen. Now, remembering that none of us heard this first one at the time, it's live. We've got every single camera recording at the same time, and on every single camera and the Zoom, the same noise level is there. So it's like this person is there talking directly in to the cameras. Bizarre, because you'd think with the distance from one person stood in one corner of the room to the other, the sound levels would be different. Frequency might be the same, but the sound level would be different. It's just pure science that would be the norm. So I have to just escape from this because I'm not intelligent enough to get this to play whilst we're in the PowerPoint. So can you turn your sound up, but you won't miss it. Oh no, so can you hear that singing?
Yeah.
And it starts to come in again the second time. There's a lady. Now, Martin wasn't speaking, Karin wasn't speaking, Becca, me, the lady over there, the gent over here, nobody was talking, and all of our mouths were caught at the same time on camera. Personally, that gets me giddy when I actually see that, because it's pretty exciting. So while we're in this escape bit, I'm going to play the next video, which is doing the review live. I'm showing you this one and not the other one where I call Karin and I start swearing because I'm a little bit giddy. So it's kind of incredible, something like this. It blows you away. So we're listening back at this point. I've just heard the noise there.
Who was singing? No one. Did anybody here sing? Yeah. No. Did anybody in this room just go, "Ooh, baby," or whatever like that? No.
So as you can see, it kind of excited me slightly, but I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any external influence from anybody in the room that had sung. And when we played it back again, it was apparent that it was actually an EVP. And to me, it's a class 1 EVP because nobody heard it in the room directly. It wasn't a direct voice phenomena. It was an electronic voice phenomena. Now, this is where it gets interesting because there are no reports of modern ghosts because the singing was pretty modern. It wasn't folky lore. Karin, you've had a report when you were going back through your history book.
Right. You on about the modern one?
That somebody else back in the 70s said.
Right, reminds me of that one because there's so many.
Reports of a woman and hearing her sing.
I'll let you say that one because I might say something different.
I think that's all I knew, that when you'd gone back through the book, it wasn't something that you knew, it wasn't recent activity that people had reported on since you ran the inn, but it was something that was in the book, that someone said they'd seen a lady and heard her sing.
Same with the little boy in the toilets in opposite the gift shop. That goes back to 1999. I mean, you're talking 27 years. So it's a similar sort of thing, but it's very interesting because why do we have this here?
You know, I couldn't work out if it was something that came in and was attached to the person who was having that room that night. They had a lot of antiquities they brought on. They'd left them on the table alongside here. And we were thinking, well, do we remove them and put them outside the door to not influence anything? We don't know what it was, but it definitely was a female, as you can hear, class 1 EVP. And it still blows me away to listen to that.
It's interesting because, you know, the room behind it, 5, you don't get reports of the old woman with the mock cap and apron anymore that was reported many years ago.
Strange. Where did they go? Did they just disappear into the ether?
Yeah, who knows?
Along with dinosaurs.
One thing that, you know, with my skeptical brain now, when I go back to the reports in the 1950s, the only paranormal report, apart from the man in the tricorn hat and the green cape that was seen walking past startled waitresses in the 1950s, the guest that stayed there when Mr. Gross was the manager with his second wife, his second wife used to say that the building during the day to her daughter was fine, but soon as night fell, she hated it. And guests would come down in the morning and say, who have been in my room, tidying up my clothes and folding them neatly on the bed? It happened quite a few times. So why hasn't that continued? If we've got Jack, supposedly from late 17 or 1800s, we're not sure, where do these ghosts or spirits go? And how can we know what is real and what isn't? Next slide.
So room 4, we've just, on our adventure, we went from 3 to 4 to 5. And this is where our team members, Karin and her partner Mike, were staying the night. And they bravely said, I kind of think it might have been slightly tongue-in-cheek at the time, but I took it as totally serious, asked for the most haunted room in the whole hotel. So Karin, being one of my best, made this happen. So room number 5 is what they got. And room number 5's history, Karin, is...
Well, again, you know, I'm very conscious not to put everything out what has been reported, because again, it's all about the data gathering. Now, when I started looking at the visitors book for 2010, 2011, I did not know there were reports from room 8 and 9 of the television being turned on at 2 o'clock in the morning. So when Caroline said about what happened in room 9, it got me thinking, and I think, well, okay, since 10, 11 years ago, the televisions have been updated. Could it be someone with a remote from the next room? But on those private nights, no one are going to bed early. Everyone is investigating, or when that telly came on, we're downstairs.
Apart from our group, who are all in this room.
Yeah. So, and that's the reason we do that. The private hire is to try and, you know, keep away from the public as much as possible, and also to control the surroundings and control the contamination. So, do you want to say what happened to you, to your friend first, then I'll say after?
Well, the history is probably a bit jumbled for this room. I think Most Haunted went in, and Derek came up with a name and a child or something. So that's the only kind of thing that we'd had being told to us, that there was a child, and the wardrobes are on this side over here against the wall, with the bathroom up towards the door to come out. Now, in advance, I will apologise about how poor this video is. It's on a wonk. It was late at night when Karin put the recording on. It was here. I can't give you the other recording because it's too visual. And I say that because Karin wasn't sleeping in very many clothes, and it would show too much and I'd be struck off from ever presenting again. So as it is, I had to click this video down. So when the video starts, what I want you to do immediately is to look at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, I think. So you'll see around about this area when the screen starts going. Now, she woke up in the middle of the night. She's laying on this side here, and she reports that she felt a dog jump on her legs because she was incredibly tired. She thought that she was her own dog. So what you will see is her patting the bed to move the dog off. Sorry, could I got to escape, haven't I? There we go. Why is that not playing? Yeah, why is it? Just bear with me, please.
There's a ghost in your computer.
This is the room that's haunted in my house. If you see stuff move behind me, just say it's behind you. So what you're doing is looking here. Can you see her patting the bed? Her partner's there on the other side of the bed. She's having a bit of a stretch, and then she pats it again because she's...
I can't see nothing.
Oh, hang on a minute, I better escape. I think it's going to cut into her getting out of bed. No, stop. See on the bottom, literally, she just...
I can only see room 5's picture.
Oh, you're seeing it?
No.
Can you see that now?
Yeah, the video's not playing.
Oh, I'm watching it play. Is it not playing for you?
No.
I don't know what else I can do because I'm seeing it play.
Should we just describe it then if we can't see it?
Right. So what Karin was doing was getting up in the, leaning forward in the bed, and she was patting, trying to sweep something off her feet because she thought there was a dog there. She assumed she was at home with Meg, her dog, until she suddenly woke up properly and then thought, well, I'm in the Jamaica Inn, I'm not at home. So there's been no reported dog reports from anybody else that stayed there, except.
Right, my cue. So
cue.
when I interviewed the lady that was born there in 1955, room 5 was her bedroom, and I candidly kept it quiet because she said as a 2-year-old she wouldn't sleep in the room on her own. Her parents had to put the pet Alsatian in the room, and then she would sleep all night, and he used to sleep on the bed with her.
Quite a coincidence. So why has the dog come back in room 5?
I've had no other reports of a ghostly dog there. I have down in the lower restaurant and the museum, but not in room 5 or the other bedrooms.
This is where the changing of history comes in, isn't it? And the hauntings change as the years go by.
It's just so quickly to emphasize, like Hannah, that everyone talks about in room 5 didn't exist 14 years ago. Someone made it up, and then now it's become a ghost.
An object to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case of do we actually, like the Philippic experiment, create the ghosts there, and suddenly they become the ghosts. So that makes it a great study on that aspect as well. Right, next slide.
So I think we're going to move on downstairs now, if I'm right, the lower restaurant. So that's what is called the back restaurant. But when Karin gives you the history, I'll give you a story. So what I want you to think about is that my group, were sat here, and then this was the entrance to the toilets, which was closed off at the time. But there was a table here, and the experiment we sat up was one part here and one part here. Karin.
Right, so we know what we call them, the upper and lower peg, the restaurant areas, are a modern extension. And same with the hallway that goes down, the gift shop on the left, the ladies, gents and disabled toilet on the right. That was originally the walkway to Bolventa Church that was built in 1857. So out of interest, the gift shop had lots and lots of poltergeist reports. The young girls would have their hair pulled. They would hear giggling when they came in to turn the lights on, because the lights had to be turned on halfway down the shop. Ever since it was refurbished 2-3 years ago, nothing. It stopped. Now, interestingly, the toilets have been refurbished in April, but the paranormal reports still continue.
That was my first paranormal experience when my late husband was alive. I think my child must have been about 3. We were coming back from Cornwall and we stopped in at Jamaica Inn, and it was en route and it was a long journey back in those days with a toddler, so we wanted some lunch. We had our lunch in the peddler's restaurant, and I think we were quite near the back door here, and I went into the toilet, which was in the same place. I went in, I think you had to turn left into it at that point. I think it slightly changed. I think you came in this way and then you went in that way originally. And when I was in there washing my hands, I saw a lady in full Victorian costume with blonde hair tied up on the top with a bun. And I thought somebody was dressed for Victorian clothes for, part of working there. I could see her out of my peripheral vision, and it was like a blue-grey dress. And as I looked, she disappeared. And I thought, that's weird. I haven't been drinking. So that was my first experience, and it's been on my bucket list to go back and do a proper investigation.
The Victorian lady was reported quite a few times in the gift shop, and now she seems to have travelled to room 27 and room 23.
Bizarre.
So you're going to explain about what happened to you in the lower restaurant?
So we were sat probably on the table to the left here. We do this experiment called phone to phone. So we'd had one mobile phone down here on the bottom left, and then the other one was up the top in the restaurant where I showed you by the toilets. We play white noise by the first phone, and we come down and listen here and see what we can hear that comes through, and ask questions like all good ghost hunters do. But we were hearing this noise coming through, and it was, and I apologize I don't have this recording because I've just been taken up in other places at the moment on having to do some stuff, and I haven't had the time to locate this. I will try and find it for you because it's incredibly interesting. So when we were down here, we kept hearing this, and it was a musical instrument that heard on TV programs before films. So back in the 1800s, late 1700s, if you were watching about court with the royalty, they would go in and they'd have this person there and they'd be playing this musical instrument, and it would be a form of guitar, piano kind of thing. I can't explain it properly, but we kept getting this noise come through, and it would just be like a brum. So Martin, being Martin, who's a guitarist, said, that's a bit odd. And then it kept coming back when we said, can you play that musical instrument again? And he got his phone out, and he's got an app for tuning guitars. And he said, right, the app is up now. I'm going to ask it if it can play a chord, and I'll tell you if it's the same chord that it's playing. So he said, can you play me an A chord? And obviously his voice is heard in the other room on the phone because it's on loudspeaker in both. So as he's asked out, the musical instrument played back, and it played an A chord. And we've got it on our cameras, on our body cams, that will clearly show that the musical instrument had responded with an A chord. We then asked for it to play, well, Martin asked for it to play a different chord, and it responded with that chord, and it had matched on his app on his phone to say it was the correct chord. Being the people that we are in our team, we like to try and make everything as clean as possible when we investigate, and cut out any kind of outside problems that might come in to cause that. So I said, let me go and check by the phone and see if the white noise is picking up a radio signal or something that is bringing that music in. I said, you stand down in the bottom bar and shout when you hear it, then I'll tell you if I can hear it coming from the radio or the white noise. And they said, okay. So they were downstairs and said, can you play an A chord? It played the chord. I didn't hear anything up in the top bar, nothing at all, only the white noise and him saying, can you play a chord? I'm recording it. We can't hear it up the top part of the restaurant, but they're hearing it. So no explanation for that, because it wasn't interference coming through the white noise that we'd set up for the experiment, and it was a direct voice phenomenon that was coming through the telephone. Quite interesting.
It's a fascinating experiment because it's not something I would think of. And, you know, we did a experiment with Craig Williams the other week with delta waves, how it can affect the brainwaves, how some people had supposed paranormal experiences, others just felt relaxed. And myself, I ended up with a horrible taste in my mouth. So, you know, it's a great place to do all sorts of different experiments and studies. So next slide.
This is to show you the bar. So this is the shop up here, and this is where we had our other experiment. And if you go down through the entrance into the lower bar here, we were sat right down at the very bottom. So the noise pollution wasn't something that would have through. And it was bizarre. And when we were sat here, we were hearing a tapping, and it was seating from the gift shop, wasn't it, when it was all closed off at that point. And then we were asked to confirm that they were the ones that was playing the musical instrument, like the good old paranormal known phenomena. And it was with the taps and bangs as well.
Now, interestingly, Caroline said about modern ghosts. So there is one paranormal book about the Jamaica Inn, and it says in the 1980s, if you look back on yourself in this photo, that's where the doors are. And they just shut up for the night, and the staff were having some supper. And the lady saw a man, short hair, orange jumper, I think jeans, something like that. And she walked down to say, "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" And she couldn't find him, he'd gone. Now, interestingly, this year in the museum, one of our regulars, who's a very down-to-earth lady, she saw a similar description. She said he was a skinhead with jeans. It was sort of orangey brown. It could have been a shirt or something. She thought it was another guess. He walked past her in the reflection, but disappeared. He walked into a wall. And again, this fascinates me because we always think of old ghosts. Now, have we got something from 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s? Who knows? But we're waiting to see if we have any more reports. Oh, let me start the history one.
What did you need to do the history on?
Just the lady was asking about the name.
Whereabouts? Where did you go back to?
In the question, she was asking how the Jamaica Inn got its name.
Okay.
So I'll just quickly go through that. There's two theories. 1778, when it actually became an inn, it was a private dwelling house before, from 1760. So a skinhead sounds scarier. Yeah, it does actually. You see my husband. So the Trelawney family, who were governors of the Jamaica Inn, everyone says that's how it got its name, obviously with the smuggling, the rum, etc. But I love the other version, and a chap wrote to us on our Facebook page and said that the Jamaica Inn got its name thanks to a landlord who had a load of fruit that was turning. He boiled it up into jam, and people would go there to get their jam because it was called the Jamaica Inn. Who knows?
I think that's it from us. If anybody would like to ask some questions.